It's full to see you all, and we're delighted you can join us. And we're being joined by some excellent guest speakers today as well. My name is Clare Fussell, and I'm the Bright Now Campaign Director at Operation Noah. A quick note for housekeeping before we start. You are all muted, and this meeting is being recorded. You shouldn't appear on screen unless you're invited to ask a question on camera, but feel free to switch your video off and anonymise your screen name if that's helpful for your privacy. This webinar will be put onto our YouTube channel and shared with participants as well, so you'll have a recording of it afterwards. So I'm thrilled to welcome some great speakers to our session today, and I'll give a brief introduction to each of them now. So first we'll hear from Catherine Devitt, who leads FaithInvest's programme on training, and she works with faith institutions as they work to align their beliefs and values with their investment portfolios. And next up is Matthew Jones from Epworth Investment Management, who offer carefully selected investment vehicles for charities and faith institutions and individuals that adhere to their robust Christian ethical values. Epworth is also a recent signatory to the Green Investment Declaration, and Matthew is head of asset allocation for Epworth and runs their multi-asset fund for charities. Finally, we'll hear from Rosie Venner, who's Director of Movement Building with the JustMoney movement. The JustMoney movement and Operation Noah jointly developed and launched this Green Investment Declaration, and Rosie is going to talk about how we amplify news of our positive investments. And then we'll hopefully have 15 minutes for questions and discussion at the end. Please add any questions into the chat box as we go along, and they'll be collated and addressed together at the end. So before I hand over to the other speakers, let me kick things off by introducing you to the Green Investment Declaration and give some context about how it came about. Some of you may have heard about this before, and I'm guessing for some of you it might be the first time. So the declaration was launched in late June this year, and it's designed as a tool to help churches and faith institutions to take practical steps to better align their investments with their faith values. And ultimately, it's about using their money to have real impact in building a better world. But specifically in this case, it's the Green Investment Declaration, and unsurprisingly, it's about tackling climate change. So it's about moving money into climate solutions. So where did this come from? Well, almost 2 years ago, Operation Noah published a report on the church investment in climate solutions called Financing a Livable Future, which I think should be on the next slide. Possibly the one after that. There we are. And in this, we reported that if the world redirected the planned $570 billion worth of annual oil and gas investments towards renewables instead, that this could fully finance wind and solar energy expansion in line with the 1.5 degree C warming target of the Paris Agreement. So we have the resources, it's just about where we put them. And in fact, since this report came out, as I say, almost 2 years ago, global investments in renewable energy have grown significantly. And earlier this year, the International Energy Agency published some research that stated that investment in low carbon electricity is actually likely to reach more than $900 billion this year. And that's largely powered by huge expansion in solar projects across China, which built as much capacity in 2023 as the whole world did in renewables the year before. So things are really moving in the right direction. But, and there's always a but with these things, isn't there? We also know that global oil and gas investments are still rising, and they're expected to increase by 7% this year, with oil and gas companies spending just 4% of their investment budgets on clean energy projects, while national oil companies spend even less. And so that's where this church investment initiative has come in, because churches can play a significant role. And faith institutions combined around the world manage $3 trillion. And this is money that has huge potential to shape the world that we all want to see. Not only directly through making direct investments in climate solutions, but also through making the moral case for wider movement into climate solutions across other sectors. Faith institutions still hold significant power and influence in our wider societies, and we can't afford to stay silent on this issue. But we as stewards of all we've been given, whether that's individual churches up to denomination levels, we need to ensure that our churches are not just being negatively screened for harmful activities and the money that we hold, but are also being actively invested in positive activities that address the climate crisis, which we all equally share and face. So if we go on to the next slide, the declaration has three elements. It asks churches and faith groups to do these three things, which have come up on the screen as 1, 1 and 1, but they should be 1, 2 and 3. Firstly, to make a plan to invest more in climate solutions, so ensuring their investment policy reflects that intention. Secondly, to actually move their money and make investments that have a positive impact. And thirdly, to communicate this, to speak up. Through speaking up in wider society, we can have that moral leadership and open up spaces for others to follow suit and build that momentum. And these three steps form the outline of today's webinar, and each of the speakers will speak to each one of these. So since our launch at the end of June, 12 churches and faith institutions have come on board and become signatories already, or are on the path to doing so. And some of them are here today, and if so, it's wonderful to see you and have you with us. And a further 12 have expressed their interest. So we currently have 24 organisations that we're walking alongside as part of this initiative. And there are 3 levels of the declaration. So any organisation can join at any of these levels, depending on where you are on your journey. I think on the next slide, it should outline those. This is the declaration text. Here we go. So there's an acorn level, if you're just starting out on the journey, sapling level, or up to oak tree. And it's designed to be a journey to grow with you as your investments grow. And I'd encourage you to take a look at the resources on the website and put this to your own church or organisation to consider joining. You don't already have to have a huge amount of money invested in reforestation or renewable energy or whatever it might be in order to raise this, put it on the agenda and start discussing your intention to invest more. So I'm just going to talk you briefly through what happens if you do sign up and express an interest in this and how you might be supported through the process. When churches register your interest, we ask you to provide evidence of your investment policy or annual report, or any investments that you've made, and that's then assessed by FaithInvest. We then get back to you with our recommendation for which level of the initiative you come in at, plus a suite of assets that are there to help you to publicise your involvement in the initiative. So there are logos to put on your website, sample press releases, sample motions to push things up through your governance structures of your whichever church you're part of, and social media assets and things like that as well. And then we do have ongoing support for signatories. So this is going to be driven by you, so by the churches and faith institutions that sign up, depending on what you might need to move up through the levels of the declaration. And already on the website, if you go to the next slide, there are supporting materials available. So there are FAQs, there's a church investors guide, there are case studies of institutions that have already signed up, and then you can see previous webinars as well. So I will now hand over to Catherine, and Catherine's going to tell us more about that first stage in the 3-stage journey of aligning your organisation's investment policies with your faith values. So thank you very much, Catherine.
Thank you, Claire, and hi everybody, and thank you to Operation Noah for having us join you all today. I'm going to start with a very brief introduction to FaithInvest. I'd love to know that if you have never heard of FaithInvest before, do let us know in the chat. It's always good to know how well known we are, or perhaps not as well known as we might like to think we are. So do let us know. So we are a secular organisation, but we serve all faith traditions, irrespective of their size, their geography, or the sophistication of their investment portfolio. And we help organizations align their finances with their faith beliefs and their faith values. Our work builds on the rich tradition and commitment of the major faiths to their core values and their principles, such as human rights, social justice, environmental protection, care for the poor, and so on. We achieve our vision through three ways. We convene a vibrant network for faith-based investors. We provide insightful training, education, exchange, and collaboration opportunities, which I'll share a little bit about later. And then we offer tailored one-to-one accompaniment with faith organizations who are looking to become more faith aligned to our investments. One of the aspects of that work is we provide a free service of assessing the extent to which investment policies and guidelines are faith aligned. And that's something I'll also touch on in the next couple of minutes. So Clare has already, just next slide, please, David. And then a slide after that, thank you. So Clare has already spoken about the Green Investment Declaration and the different levels of acorn, sapling, and oak, which if you visit the website, you'll find out more about. So faith-consistent investing is key to each of these phases. And that includes if you are tapping into what your beliefs and your teachings say around climate change, environmental, social justice, and creation care. But what is faith-consistent investing? So the kind of foundational definition that we like to use here in FaithInvest is that faith-consistent investing is intentionally aligning your investments with your faith values to ensure that they are used in a way that reflects and supports the teachings and the principles of your faith, and that this is done by integrating your values and your beliefs into the foundational investment governance documents and the investment processes of your organization. What this does then is it roots your investment decisions in your faith values and your faith heritage, and it translates your values then into investment language. And this is why, if you are embarking on the Green Investment Declaration, it has to start with that integration of your faith values into your investment documents. And I think, Clare, particularly on the acorn level, that's one of the explicit requirements, is that values aligned is explicit within the organization's investment policy. Next slide, David. So this all sounds very obvious. Why would a faith organization not have their faith explicit and integrated within their investment strategies? Sounds obvious, but we here in FaithInvest, we assess the investment policies and guidelines of faith organizations, and this is something we make available to all. We assess for faith alignment, and our research shows that while faith investors might have good intentions and they're very clear on their mission and their good work, a considerable proportion of those organizations, of the investment policies and guidelines that we assessed, do not have an explicit faith role in their investment decisions. So at the moment, we have a database of around, I think, maybe 100, 120 or so investment policy and guidelines. And of that sample, around 45% had no reference to their faith role within those essential governance documents. On to the next slide. So what are the implications of this, you might ask? So if your faith values do not show up in your investment policy, if they're not in your guidelines or in your governance structures, your investments are just going to be a collection of stuff. If you are in an organization now which isn't really integrating faith values into your portfolio, you're going to look at the portfolio and you're going to say, why do we do that? Why do we own this? Why are we doing this? Your portfolio will look like a collection of books without any real theme or expression of the faith itself, of your faith. And you may end up with unintended investment outcomes that are against your faith values. So if you don't have your faith made explicit and written down within these essential documents, you can't hold anyone accountable. Next slide, David. So how you do faith consistent investing is through these essential components. And we look at these components in terms of our work, in terms of our training, in our accompaniment with faith organizations. So it needs to be, your faith beliefs and core teachings need to be integrated within your investment policy, your investment guidelines, your investment governance, whatever that might look like for you as an organization, your committees, your oversight, and in your investment communications. So you have to capture your values clearly within your policy and your guidelines, because these are the instructions about what you want to do with your investments to your asset manager, for example. Next slide, David. So a big question we often hear is how is this going to impact on performance? How is this going to impact on returns? So many believe that faith consistent investing can lead to better long-term performance, but we always say that this is a very important discussion to have with your faith leadership, your investment leadership, the governing body overseeing your faith assets, and your investment consultants as well. So just moving on then to some inspiring case studies to share with you of organizations that we have worked very closely with here in FaithInvest on faith consistent investing. The first is with the European province of the Society of the Holy Child Jesus, and I think we're probably joined by Sister Carmel here today. This is a project which is very dear to our hearts here in FaithInvest because of the fantastic case study that emerged, but also just the very rich journey that we embarked with the province. So we work with the Society for the Holy Child Jesus over around a 12-month period or so. The province, they wanted to align their portfolio with their guiding principles of the enhancement of human dignity and the care for our common home. And then the values that flow from this. So for the province, it was justice, peace, and compassion. So these were the core kind of value framework that they wanted to make explicit within their investment portfolio. So first of all, we started with a thorough analysis of their investment policies and their guidelines. We then helped the province to integrate these principles into their portfolio through a step-by-step process. And that included guiding the province on values reflection. So we spent a lot of time actually discerning what are our values. And that might sound quite an obvious question, but sometimes it can be difficult to really name the core values that you want to integrate into your investments and that really reflect your faith heritage and your faith mission. So we spent time on that. We guided the province on that, and they led on a lot of this work. And then from that, then we drafted what we call the front door language of the investment policy. So the part where you're really making it explicit what you want to bring in to your policy and your guidelines, and really articulate the faith values of the province to ensure that their investments met those values and the objectives of the province. So then we also assisted them in collaborating with portfolio managers and consultants. So the outcome of this work, the Society for the Holy Child Jesus, they successfully revised their investment policy and their guidelines, and they reflected a much clearer and stronger language on the faith-based priorities such as human dignity, environmental stewardship, and social responsibility. So new guidelines were also included for environmental, social, and governance criteria, and there was a stronger emphasis on human rights, environmental impact, and the protection of human life. They also then included enhanced reporting requirements for their asset managers, including around ESG coverage and specific values-based reporting. The province also developed a wish list for the future, and this included proxy voting guidelines for the trust to share with their asset managers and continued exploration around impact investing. The trustees then also requested that their investments align with the net zero asset managers commitment, net zero goals, to see year-on-year progress towards this objective, and that the managers then report on progress within the portfolio at least annually. Just to say, we did an event with Operation Noah around this time last year in London, and David, the finance director from the province, joined that event, and he gave a really fascinating insight into this particular project. And I think Pippa will just drop a link into the YouTube recording of that talk. So I'm conscious I'm running out of time. So just to wrap up very quickly, we do provide a training program that really goes into a lot deeper detail. David, if you can just move on to the next slide. Next slide, please. So their next training round starts on the 29th of October, and we go into a lot more detail on how you become a lot more faith aligned, looking very much at your investment policy and your guidelines, looking at governance and what that might mean from a faith consistent investing perspective. And strongly encourage you, if you have any questions about this opportunity, please do get in touch with me at training@faithinvest.org. We do have a number of bursaries available, and I'd be more than happy to discuss you joining the course with us if it's of interest. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks so much for that, Catherine. And please do, if you have any questions for Catherine, add those into the chat and we'll be collating those and can address them at the end. So we'll move now to welcome Matthew from Epworth Investment, and he can talk a little bit more about their approach to investing in climate solutions. Thank you, Matthew.
Thank you very much, Claire. Pleasure to be speaking to you all this afternoon. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Matt. I'm the head of asset allocation here at Epworth Investment Management. And beyond Epworth, I'm also a trustee of my local church and chair of my church sustainability committee. And on just this last Sunday, I was speaking with the congregation as part of this year's season of creation. So the only reason I mention that is I like to think I see this issue of climate investment and what we do as Christians from multiple angles. But Epworth is wholly owned by the Methodist Church, and we are dedicated to providing solutions for UK charities that want their investments managed in alignment with the Christian faith. That's what our focus is, Christian faith aligned investment. So we think we're reasonably unique in the market in that sense. I've only got a brief time to speak with you today. So this presentation is going to focus on some of our investments in climate solutions, really bringing to life the examples of the policy, if you like, that Catherine's just spoken to us about. But if you're not familiar with Epworth, I'd encourage you to visit our website. And you can read our ethical pillars document, I think, which you can find on our website. That really outlines how we implement Christian principles across our investment universe. There's a broad spectrum of modern ethical challenges when it comes to investment and faith, not just climate related that we're talking about today. David, if we could have the next slide, please. Just to say, the key product I manage is Epworth's multi-asset fund, which is an investment product only open to charities providing access to the whole ethical investment universe. So it's across a range of asset classes, a diversified mix of exposures for charities wanting a long-term return on their investments. Again, you can find more details about this fund on our website, but the reason I'm highlighting this is that every investment idea I'm about to introduce you to today is held within this fund as a reasonably significant holding. So how do we define a climate solution investment as contributing to a green investment declaration? Well, to me, an investment implies a financial return. So that makes it quite different to philanthropy. We're not talking about grant giving here. We're talking about generating a financial return in tension with a positive climate solution. So these are important factors to hold together when we consider how investors and business can contribute to a successful energy transition and decarbonisation of our modern economy. And Epworth clients, at the end of the day, are all charities doing great work in their spheres of influence. So it's really important that we give them a positive financial return on their investments to continue supporting and growing that work. So it's important they get the financial return as well as those investments complementing the objectives that they are seeking to achieve. At Epworth, we believe that investors can make a significant difference, not just by what we don't invest in. We don't invest in oil and gas. There's a number of other exclusions that we make to our investment universe. But actually, we like to focus much more on what we do invest in and how we can actively steward those investments that we do make for a positive future. I think a lot of investment houses, particularly in this modern era, talk quite a good game on this issue. But actually, when you scratch below the surface, often it can amount to little more than a few minor exclusions in places rather than thinking actively about what we can positively invest in to make our world a better place. So let me move on to the next slide and talk to you about a couple of the solutions that we invest in at Epworth. I'm going to start with the classic example, and Claire mentioned renewable energy right at the top of this meeting. But building renewable energy generators has been the classic climate solution example for an investor over the last 10 or 15 years, I think. This is one example, a company called Greencoat UK Winds, that has been quite a successful investment for us over the last few years. Greencoat's been scaling up renewable energy provision across the UK by building and operating several onshore and offshore wind farms. So investors such as ourselves and our clients provide the capital to build these wind farms and then receive dividends back over a contracted period, 10, 20, 30 years from the power that is generated by those wind turbines and sold back to the grids to provide consumers in this country with clean energy. So the assets built by this trust in particular now develop enough power to supply almost 2 million homes, which means obviously millions of tons of carbon emissions being avoided because this generation has replaced reliance on dirty fossil fuels for power. This webinar is quite timely this week because you may have seen the news the last couple of days that the UK has just closed its last coal-fired power station, which I think is a remarkable achievement considering that we only need to go back to 2017, where we'd never seen a day since the Industrial Revolution without having to burn coal in order to generate our electricity. So we've gone from being totally reliant on coal for our energy generation to now not needing it at all to keep our lights on and keep our homes warm. I guess the broader point is that our media don't like to tell us the good news very often, which is why I've included the chart on this slide as well, which talks not just about the UK, but the broader European Union move to transitioning away from burning fossil fuels for power, and how that rapid installation of renewable energy assets is enabling that growth. And the bloc's recently passed the milestone you can see on the screen. It now generates more energy from renewables than it does from fossil fuels. And that can only be achieved by significant investment in cleaner energy. And I'm going to come on to another example of a solution that has really led to that step change in that development of the energy mix within the European Union shortly. But Greencoat is an infrastructure investment. It's held alongside other infrastructure investments in the multi-asset fund at Epworth. And they offer climate-related solutions such as energy efficiency assets. So we also got things like investments in providing LED lighting to businesses, trying to cut their electricity use, energy from waste, all of these sorts of solutions that all need to form part of our infrastructure investment. But these are perhaps well-known, established climate solutions that we've heard of before, and we need much wider change beyond just the energy sector in order to save the global ecosystem. So David, if we could move to the next slide, let me talk about another significant generator of carbon emissions, and that's the construction industry. This industry is responsible for about 15% of global emissions, give or take, and it's increasingly scrutinized for its use of carbon-intensive materials in the buildings that we all live and work in. Now, one of our investments at Epworth is we hold shares in a Swiss company called Sika. That's a global leader in developing and manufacturing specialty chemicals. So this company is large. It accounts for about 11% of the supply of construction chemicals globally. And Sika has achieved this size by being a well-run business that generates attractive returns on investors' capital. And we've held this company for quite a few years now in our funds. But not only is it an attractive financial investment for investors, but Sika is also, I think, a leader within its sector at developing products that advance the cause of decarbonisation in the construction sector. Sika has developed advanced admixtures. I'm no chemical expert, let me be honest with you, but these admixtures improve the performance and reduce the carbon intensity of concrete. And the company has also created carbon sequestering materials that can be manufactured and used in a more energy efficient manner. So one example that Sika is working on is using its chemical expertise to convert waste products derived from steel production and into ingredients for more sustainable cement. So they take the waste product of steel mills that are often located quite close to their own manufacturing facilities and use that to make more environmentally friendly cement. So it's estimated that by making this change in the way they can produce cement, it could save up to perhaps 150,000 tons of carbon every year annually just in Sika's cement manufacturing process when it's fully implemented over the next couple of years. But moreover, Sika is also working on other products and ideas that can extend the life cycle of buildings and reduce the need for construction in the first place and the associated emissions. Now, on its own, this is perhaps a small win for the planet, but when you build it as part of a portfolio, one of a number of companies we've got offering niche solutions within their sectors that benefit the climate, we believe investments like these add up to make quite a significant impact. So far I've covered traditional investments, both in infrastructure projects and company shares, but there's one more innovative solution I think I've got time to introduce you to that we've recently made investments for our clients. If I can move on to the next slide, please, David. Now, apologies, this example is a much the more complex. I've got to forgive me if I'm not able to take you all with me on this description. But fundamentally, we think a lot about commodities and particularly fossil fuel commodities and the harm they do. And when we don't invest in oil. I don't have oil as an asset in my multi-asset fund. But we can invest now in carbon as an asset. Now, let me talk you through it. So an essential part of any plan for a successful transition to a more climate-friendly economy is to incentivize participants in the economy to stop or evolve their activities that generate significant greenhouse gas emissions. So in 2008, the EU pioneered what has now become the world's largest regulated carbon market, and that requires polluting industry operating on the continent to buy permits that put a proper financial cost cap on their emissions. As the EU's main decarbonisation tool, this emissions trading scheme aims to reduce emissions by 55% by 2030, and the success of this scheme has seen many others launch around the world. So going back to that chart I showed you a couple of slides ago about how quickly the EU is now moving towards renewable energy in its energy mix, it is this scheme, this charging polluters for every ton of CO2 they emit, forcing them to buy permits to keep emitting, that is forcing the energy sector in the EU to switch its energy generation assets, make those investments, and decarbonise quickly. So how does it do that? Well, it incentivizes CO2 reduction by limiting and steadily reducing the supply of these permits over time in a manner consistent with those net zero targets. So this creates a growing scarcity of permits and raises therefore the price that polluters have to pay if they want to keep polluting. So there's the incentive to invest in greener solutions so they don't have to keep buying the permits. So as the scheme has developed, the price of carbon has risen because not only is the supply of those permits being cut, but the EU has also expanded it to cover more sectors. And the great benefit of this sector, and I sort of touch on it on the bottom of the slide there, that the revenues the EU is generating from auctioning these permits off to polluters is then using to invest in quite significant revenues now in funding green projects at member state level. So it's taking money from polluters and channeling it directly in to more climate-friendly solutions. And the EU is now generating significant revenues from doing this. This is now its second largest revenue generator after member states' own contributions to its budget. This scheme has proved to be much more effective at carbon reduction and more popular than the alternatives that are mentioned in the top corner of the slide, so such as direct taxation or voluntary carbon offsets that we often hear talked about. This is because it provides a proper economic incentive for polluters. It gets polluters to put a price on their pollution and forces them to change their behaviour, and it ensures that emissions are capped at a level that we need to cap them at, and allowing the free market to determine the financial price that should be applied to achieve those targets. So that explains how that system works, but I've not explained how we as investors can get involved in that market and why we can help it run smoothly. Well, ultimately, it's not just polluters that can buy these permits. The polluters clearly need to surrender these permits to compensate for their emissions, but actually investors can buy permits and withhold them from circulation. They don't need to surrender them. They can hold them as a commodity investment. These carbon permits are trading in the secondary market, just like traditional commodities, such as oil and gold. So investors can hold these permits to diversify their investments with sort of different investment characteristics from their shareholdings, from their infrastructures projects, and that benefits from the need for the carbon price to rise over the next 5-10 years to meet those net zero targets and fund the technologies, the greener technologies we need to make viable at scale. So as the supply of permits falls and more sectors come under the scope of the scheme, such as airlines, shipping, steel industry, cement, there's a growing demand for those permits and a shrinking supply. That gives a good investment case. So I'm conscious I'm reaching the end of my slot. So if we pop to the next slide, please, David. Let me just sum up and highlight that we have many more investment examples than the three I've just talked to you about. This is an image that we put in our multi-asset fund fact sheet every quarter. You can find that on our website. But this chart basically aims to give examples of how our investments are aligning with our Christian ethical values across the whole spectrum of issues that we face in the modern investment world, not just climate solutions. Ultimately, the most important thing we can do at Epworth as an asset manager for charities is communicate clearly to our clients what their money is invested in, so they can assess that their money is aligned with their values, as well as generating the financial returns that they require. Now, we regularly seek our clients' views on investment holdings and issues. We have an annual survey, and that allows us to work hard and in our clients' interests to invest in and petition investee companies with the objective of making a positive difference to our world. So if you just flick to the final slide, please, David, then you show the T's and C's. But just to say thank you for your time today. I'm happy to address any questions at the end of the session. Or alternatively, if you have any questions after this session, you can contact us through our website. Thank you very much. I'll hand back to Claire.
Wonderful. Thank you for that, Matthew, and for those insights. It's really interesting to hear those examples of how you're investing in practice on behalf of your clients and Christians around the country. So thank you so much for that. And I've already been scribbling down a couple of questions. I'm sure other people will as well. So a reminder to pop those into the chat so we can address them at the end. Thank you. So that just remains to hand over to Rosie from the Just Money movement, and she's going to talk a bit about the third element of the Green Investment Declaration. We've heard all about aligning our investment policies. We've heard from Matthew about actually practically how to invest in climate solutions and what some of that might look like. And now we're going to hear about how we can help amplify what we're doing and build a movement together for green investment. So thank you for that, Rosie.
Thanks, Claire, and thanks, Catherine and Matt, for your really helpful contributions. So yes, before we move to a time of questions, I want to just take us back to that concept of the Green Investment Declaration to explore why we're inviting institutions not just to become signatories and take those practical steps of commitment and action within their investment policies and their asset management, but to be advocates to help build the movement of faith communities investing in climate solutions. I'm going to look briefly at why now is the time to do that, why we should be doing this publicly and collectively, and what role we can each play, whether we are financial decision makers, asset managers, faith leaders, theologians, grassroots campaigners, or simply members of local congregations and communities concerned about the climate crisis. So if you could go to slide 2, David, thank you. So first, I just wanted to offer a quick reflection on why Just Money movement has been part of the development of the declaration and why we're excited to be involved. Seeking a fair and just use of money is a thread that runs through all our work and campaigns. So on the slide, you'll just see a section of our theory of change, just to give you a flavour of where we're coming from. As an ecumenical Christian organisation, we work primarily in the UK, helping Christians as individuals and part of churches connect their faith, their values and their financial choices, and speak up for a just use of money by businesses, by banks, by investors, to shape a fairer, greener world. And to reach that overarching vision of a world where money is used to shape a fairer, greener future requires participating in and helping to mobilise a movement that is bigger and more impactful than what we can do alone. And I see that as a founding principle of the Green Investment Declaration too. There's so much more that we can do when we act together. And there are lots of different elements to building a movement of change. There's education and knowledge sharing. There's behaviour change, there's solidarity and relationship building. There's the opportunity to tell a different story, a different narrative about what we're about and what change we want to see. Movement building is also about seeking a transformation in structures and systems and championing alternatives. And I see the declaration as playing a part in all of those different aspects of being part of a movement for change. So it has the potential to be an educational tool. I think it can help institutions deepen their knowledge of responsible and sustainable investing and share this learning with others. We hope that it will lead to behaviour change, so in the detail of investment policies, as Catherine has spoken about, and in the questions that institutions are asking of their asset managers. The declaration is also a tool for solidarity and relationship building. I see it as a public commitment to stand alongside communities most affected by the climate crisis. It helps us tell a different story about what it means to steward our resources well for the common good. And ultimately, an increase in investments in climate solutions will bring that real transformative change that we want to see in the world. And that's why at JustMoney Movement, we're really excited to be involved. So on to the next slide, please. I imagine I don't need to go into much detail about why now. We know there's an urgent need to end expansion of fossil fuel production, finance a fair and fast energy transition that safeguards nature and leaves no communities behind. And increasingly, as many of you will know, faith institutions are looking at how their investments are aligned with their net zero commitments and their climate action. It's really encouraging that there's increased knowledge about the climate crisis amongst the grassroots of faith communities and those involved in governance and financial decision making. We know what we need to do, and we know that it needs to happen at pace. And there are institutions that are taking a really pioneering approach with their investments, others who are more cautious, and maybe some for whom investing in climate solutions is very far from being on the agenda. But we hope that the declaration can be a really useful tool for faith-based investors because it has those multiple entry points, those different levels from acorn to oak. So you might be at the very start of your journey towards making greener investments, or you're further along and able to speak about the work that you've been doing in a way that will support and inspire others. And we know that one of the potential challenges for investors is finding suitable funds and the scaling up of investable opportunities. There needs to be more confidence in impact measurement and more standardization across the sector so that we know that our investments are having a real impact. And I think collective action is really important here too. But as the declaration grows and the diversity of signatories grows, I think it has the potential to demonstrate the appetite for investing in climate solutions amongst faith-based institutions and to influence the wider sector. So there's obviously a role for governments and regulators and asset managers too, but they need to know that the ambition and desire is there. If we can go on to the next slide. Faith communities still have a very public voice. Just as faith-based institutions have played a key role in the divestment movement and have for many, many years been pioneers in ethical investing based on negative screening, faith communities will also play a significant part in growing the movement for investing in a just transition. And I found this to be a very helpful quote from the moderator of the World Council of Churches Commission on Climate Justice and Sustainable Development, speaking earlier this year. And he's talking more broadly about the role of faith groups in climate action. But he says, let us be the ones to show that there is a will, there is a commitment, and let us help others commit as well. And I think that sums up for me my understanding of the declaration and my hope for its impact that enables each of us in this very practical way of looking at where we invest our institutional assets to commit to action on the climate and nature crises and to bring others along with us. And let's go on to slide 5. Thank you. So that's why amplifying the movement and speaking up, sharing experiences and knowledge is a core part of the declaration. It's built into all levels. There's that expectation and encouragement that signatories will promote investing in climate solutions to others in their networks. And we want to help you do that, whether that's information to share online, as Clare as explained about earlier, things that you can use to talk about your involvement in the declaration that signal your commitments, to opportunities to share your story and learning with others, maybe ways in which peers who are involved in investing can come together and talk about the work that they're doing. And then on to the final slide. I'll just wrap up now because I want to give us enough time for questions. But everything that you need to know to get more involved is on the declaration page hosted by FaithInvest. And I think we'll put this slide up at the end as well. But please do take the time to explore the declaration, consider who you could share it with, and let us know if there's any further information that you need. And I'll hand back to Claire and look forward to hearing questions from those of you on the call.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that, Rosie. And you're bang on time. We have a quarter of an hour left for questions, so that's fantastic. Thank you for speeding us through that so that we have time to discuss now. I'm not sure if there have been any questions yet in the chat, but do raise your hand if you'd like to ask one, and or write your messages in now. I've seen one message come through from Andrew Jenkins, and his question is, have any Anglican dioceses signed up to the declaration, and are there any diocesan environment officers or net zero carbon officers involved so far? And I'm not yes, so we have two Anglican dioceses who are at various stages of signing up to this. So the Diocese of Truro was one of our first signatories. And the Diocese of Blackburn, this has prompted a divestment announcement first before they can then sign up to the declaration, because one of the requirements of the declaration is to be divested from fossil fuels. And I think they discovered that there was one very, very tiny fund left that they weren't 100% sure was divested. So that's prompted some action there, and they will be joining as well, which is wonderful news. And we also have a Catholic diocese who is on the same sort of process as well. So far, yes, there's a couple of Anglican dioceses that have been involved. And then there's a question about our local parish churches being encouraged to make a green investment declaration. And yes, absolutely, if you have investments. So we recognise that not all local churches will have a huge amount of reserves or money invested anywhere other than just in a standard bank account. But if you do hold other investments, then absolutely, it would be wonderful to have you join and help to amplify what you're doing. While other questions come in, and I can't see raised hands from here, so I hope somebody else is able to monitor that. I had a question for Matthew, because sometimes when conversations with people, they'll say, "Oh, well, I might be on a investment committee for a diocese or for a PCC or a local church council, and we first and foremost have to think about our returns and our fiduciary duty, and there are concerns that green investments might lead to lower revenues." And I wonder what you might say to that, and whether there's what your response would be to that question, Matthew.
Thank you. Sorry, needed to unmute myself. Good question. It's a question we do get a lot. I think what we say at Epworth is that we believe over the long term that running an ethical mandate, and however you define that, doesn't need to cost returns. Indeed, we believe our long-term investment track record is comparable to our sort of unethical peers, if you like, what the mainstream whole of market peers. But you do have to think carefully and design your portfolio carefully to accommodate risks and things that might arise from excluding certain sectors. Now, clearly, we don't invest in the oil and gas sector. It's a timely meeting. We know what's going on in the Middle East at the moment, and we're seeing some oil price volatility, which we don't have exposure to. But we believe over the long term, this evens it out. So although the oil price is up 5 or more % this week, actually over the last 3 months, it's actually off. It's fallen about 15%. So over the long term, these returns, we think, even themselves out. And we see that generally in our historic track record. But there are times when quarters or even years, perhaps, where it can be particularly painful. The other thing I'd say, actually, is that in the sort of main investment industry, they actually talk about the climate transition as being a positive investment theme. Us investment managers are constantly looking for the next great structural trend, the next great bandwagon we can put money into that is going to deliver long-term returns over a sustainable horizon. And the climate transition is that, investing in these new technologies, the ones that work will be enormously profitable for those companies, and spotting them is what the job of an investment manager is. So actually, you've got an opportunity to be exposed to a positive trend. And if we really believe in this stuff, and if we really believe that the energy transition needs to be effective and take place quickly, oil and gas companies that don't transition, where are they going to be left as a going concern in 10, 20 years' time? So if you really believe in this stuff, you've got to say, I think the financial returns should be reasonably positive, even taking account of what you've excluded on a long-term basis, would be my answer to that question.
Wonderful, thank you. That's very helpful. Hope everybody was making notes, ready to take that back to your teams and committees to have that conversation. Looking at the chat, a couple of other questions have come in. I'll take them in the order they've arrived. So the first one is from Hugh, saying, in what way are we working with the Church of England Pensions Board, who are leaders in this field? And yes, so the Church of England and CCLA as well have been leaders in in recent years starting to look at investing in climate solutions as well, and the offer is open for them to sign up to this declaration, just as Epworth have done on behalf of the clients that they represent as well. And we have been in touch with stakeholders from across different denominations in the formation of this initiative, just to get their feedback and input to ensure that it works for churches across the whole spectrum. So it has been really helpful to have that input from them as well. I'm not sure if there's anything else that any of my colleagues might say on that from JustMoney movement or FaithInvest perspective as well, but do jump in if so. There was a question for Matthew again about carbon markets and the impact a coordinated campaign or investment from global faith groups could have on those markets. Well, that's an interesting one. Matthew, any thoughts on that?
Yes, sorry, I'm muting myself again. Good question. In terms of coordinated campaign, it depends what you mean. Ultimately, these are investments. It's important you do the due diligence on investments, and that's my job as the fund manager, and I've taken that conviction. But I guess ultimately you could say if the more capital that flows into these markets that buys these, in this case, these permits, that implies a higher price, which is obviously what the polluters are paying. So you could say there is a positive environmental benefit to be had there, and it expedite the climate transition. But actually, speculative investors like ourselves are actually a very small part of that market. We're only about 10% of the typical buyers of these permits, because most of them are bought by industry when they need to, in order to surrender the permits they're required to surrender to the regulator. If they don't buy these permits, if they don't comply, they receive quite hefty fines. So there's quite a financial incentive for them to comply. I guess in theory, if a whole massive amount of capital flowed into these markets, into these permits, that would cause a spike in the price and hurt polluters. But these are risky investors. This is very much at the riskier end of the investments, which is why it's part of a diversified portfolio with us. I wouldn't encourage individual churches or uneducated investors to start buying directly without having done some real homework and talked through with some professionals.
Well, that is a fascinating idea, isn't it? That by actually investing in those permits, you're firstly increasing their price, but also secondly reducing their supply, aren't you? So actually there'll be fewer permits to go around anyway. So as well as being more expensive, it will accelerate that transition, which is fascinating. Thank you. A question from Rosie. If you're in a local congregation wanting to start a conversation about how you steward your money for good, including climate action, do take a look at JustMoney Movement's resources for churches. So that's not so much a question as a plug, but I would endorse that. Do have a look, because there's some really, really good resources for congregational levels and conversations to think about how you use your money. So thank you for that. Any further questions that I've missed? I don't think so. Great. Okay. In which case, I will wrap up. Well, thank you so much to all our speakers today and for everybody for joining us and participating and contributing some really thought-provoking questions. I think as Christians, we all live an active hope, don't we? And we all trust in a creative and a loving God who is in control of all things. And I think through living out that hope, we create hope for others. And we can build a better world in a multitude of ways, but one way particularly we're thinking about today, the money that we hold, the wealth that's in our institutions and the investments that we can make. And I hope that this afternoon we've been inspired by some of what we've heard and the hopeful stories and examples that have been given by our speakers about Christians using their money to do just that and build a cleaner and greener future. And I hope that you're inspired to join us and to come onto the journey of the Green Investment Declaration and sign up today. And if you want any further information about that, do contact any of us who've been speaking on the call today, and we can give you some more information. The recording will be available for you to share with people in your church communities to persuade them of the urgency of green investment. And as well as this recording, I really want to commend to you the whole suite of films from our conference that Catherine mentioned that happened almost a year ago. I think it was November last year, from our Church Investment in Climate Solutions conference, that includes a wide range of case studies of church bodies who have taken steps to invest in climate solutions and provide more inspiration for you to do the same. And finally, although this is a little plug for Operation Noah, and I know we are a coalition here today, but I'd also like to highlight a couple of ways you could join in with us in celebrating Operation Noah's 20th anniversary this year. And particularly next month, we're holding a service in London, which will take place on Monday, the 18th of November, where Rowan Williams will be speaking. So do go to our website and put in /anniversary, and you can sign up to join us at that event. That will be during COP29, when various other things are happening in London. There'll be a march on the Saturday. So if you're coming up for that, do stay on and join us for that special anniversary service. We're also inviting our supporters to plant a tree for Operation Noah later this year. I think a number of us on the call are going to be coming together on Sunday to plant a tree for Operation Noah. And if that's something that you and your congregation and your community would like to do, again, please let us know and we'd love to send you some more information. I think it just remains me to say thank you so much to all our team behind the scenes and our excellent speakers, and thank you again for joining us. Take care. Bye.